Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us today for our next edition of the Speed webinar series. My name is Graham. I'm the marketing coordinator here at WinMagic, and I'll be your host for today's webinar. Today, our team will be demonstrating our PIV card solution for Linux encryption and multi-factor authentication, as was covered at a high level in our previous webinar. We will be diving more into this specific use case a little bit later in today's presentation. In terms of logistics, before we begin, I just have a few main points I want to touch on. The first being, we would like to remind you, the webinar is recorded, and a link to that recording will be included in the thank you follow-up email sent out about 24 hours after today's presentation. We'd like to encourage you to fill out the survey at the end of the presentation so we can continue to use your feedback to continue to deliver quality, relevant content. And finally, please drop questions that you may have in the Q&A box below. We'll do our best to get to them. If they aren't answered, a WinMagic rep will reach out to you directly to answer them one-on-one. With that, let's go through today's agenda. All right. So in terms of a quick summary of what we're going to be talking about today, we'll have a quick recap on our POTUS, on our President of the United States Executive Order on Cybersecurity, lessons learned from a U.S. federal agency deployment webinar. Long title, I know, but bear with me. From that webinar, we'll be specifically focusing on a deep dive for the Department of Energy case study that was covered in that webinar. And then we'll transition to a demonstration of our PIV card solution for Linux and how it was specifically deployed for the Department of Energy. Then we'll be transitioning into a conclusion, our typical conclusion with an open floor Q&A and an overall summary of what we've talked about here today. With that, let's introduce you to today's panel. Alrighty, so today's panel consists of two wonderful members of our WinMagic team. We have Lloyd Grimes, our customer success manager here at WinMagic, and Raimundo Garcia. He's part of our amazing pre-sales engineering team here. Lloyd will recap our previous webinar and walk us through the context surrounding our successful DOE deployment. And then Raimundo will be actually leading the demonstration today for you guys of our Linux PIV card solution, and he'll be here to answer any more of the more technically difficult questions. Okay, so now we'll turn this over to Lloyd.
Good morning, everyone. Appreciate your time today. Good morning, good afternoon, good evening, depending on where you are. As Graham mentioned, we had a webinar that we hosted previously on our work with the Department of Energy, and we touched on the timing of the executive order and its trickle-down effects to federal agencies. With the 180-day timeline that started on May 12th, we are essentially at the halfway point of the mandated use of MFA and encryption for data at rest. During that webinar, we actually discussed the rollout and adoption improvement tactics that we can put together, tiered rollouts and those type of ideas, value of actually was taking place for security. And some of those key takeaways really were security for security's sake. So really asymmetric cryptography is the key, pun intended. Total cost of ownership, encryption and authentication working together and how that combines within your environment. And then the overall user experience, happy user, easy rollout, easy adoption. And that's really what we're going to be diving into today and taking a look at. Some of the things that we worked on specifically with the Department of Energy is their overall challenges. So Graham, if you can go to the next slide. I think what I covered here is I put together just a quick high level of what took place for them and addressing the executive order in a timely fashion. So they had a very predetermined environment, specifically with PIV cards for MFA. When they looked at their options, they had conversations with several partners, and they found that some had their own built-in encryption, but at the same time, it wasn't specific to support PIV cards. So in working with our team and walking through that solution, we did what we call a discovery and analysis with their overall environment, understanding what their team needed from us and working that into and having that built around the SecureDoc solution. Really what it comes down is the lessons learned is in working with their partners across different organizations and different groups, the Department of Energy was able to find the right fit for their needs, specifically making sure that security was not compromised, while still addressing their unique need within PIV cards, specifically for Linux, and then making sure that total cost of ownership was actually taken care of, all while making a seamless transition for the end user. one of the key things to consider within your process is if the end user is not adopting the solution, it can lead to initial issues and as you're going through your rollout. To walk deeper through the technical side of what took place, we're actually going to have Raimundo actually go through a demonstration of what that looks like and then go from there. So if you want us to be able to hand that over to Raimundo Graham for him to be able to share his screen. Now, as Raimundo's going to pull this up and pull everything together, what we're really looking for is this to be as interactive as possible with you as the audience. So any questions that you have, feel free to drop them into the Q&A box. And at the end, as Raimundo does a summary, we'll actually touch on those and see which questions we can pull forward from the audience. But for now, over to you, Ray.
Thanks, everyone. Today, I'm going to demonstrate the WinMagic solution for encrypting Linux endpoints. During this demonstration, first, I will start encrypting a Red Hat endpoint. Next, I will provision this endpoint with a user and demonstrate unlocking this system first with a password, and then with a PIV card. In this case, it's going to be a YubiKey. I will then proceed to show some of the capabilities of our PIPI Connect technology to seamless support authenticating users at Preboot over the network, as well as unlocking the device automatically when the device is in a trusted environment. And last, I will quickly show how we apply the same technology in a Windows encrypted endpoint. I hope you all can see my screen. I already have the WinMagic client downloaded to this Red Hat endpoint. I'm going to do an LSBLK to show the partitions that we're going to be protecting, and the ones containing data is going to be these two partitions, root and swap. So let me So I'm going to extract the WinMagic client. And I'm going to start the installation. So this is going to take a few minutes. In the meantime, I'm going to go to my SES server. Show you how we support multiple OSs. In this case, you can see I have some AWS cloud servers. We can also encrypt Azure servers. We have Windows, we have Mac. I already have a Red Hat client. And also we can install Ubuntu. We come to the users. These users that you see here are mostly imported from Active Directory. It could be local users that I create here in this console, or it can be also local users from the endpoints. Some of these users, you see that they have this icon. This is pretty much means that the user contains a certificate. I created these certificates on Active Directory and already added these certificates to the UV key. So click on one of these users. I'm clicking Sarah. You can see that Sarah has a certificate, but in this case, I'm not still protecting this user by a certificate. This user is still protected by a password. So let's go back to my Red Hat. Okay, the installation already finished. Login. Actually, in this case, let me just log in with the end user. Let's assume this machine belongs to Sarah. Going to sign in. Go over here. Let's see. Let's look for this device. This is the device. It shows that it's still encrypting. Because it doesn't have a user, it's not asking yet for credentials at Preboot. It's doing what is called a temporary Autoboot. And the only user present is the deploying user. So now I'm being asked, is Sarah is the owner of this device? If it's not, I just click later and don't do the provisioning. Because Sarah is the owner, I'm going to type the password twice. And as you can see, well, the primary account on this device was set up successfully for the user Sarah. Going back to my SES server, if I refresh, you can see that now Sarah is present. The key file is cache. She's set as the owner, and the key file protection type is a password. So let me reboot this device and show you how Sarah is going to log in. This is the Preboot. So it's going to type the user ID and password. And we get to the screen. So now I'm going to change Sarah protection from the password to a PIV to a token. So let's click in Sarah. Let's change the protection. I'm going to restart the service here. So I guess the key file updated. Okay. Now I'm going to reboot this device. So let's try Sarah again using the password. It's telling me no, you can use a password. Please insert the card reader and try again. So let me come back here and connect my card reader. I want to show you something. I have this utility. Let's connect my YubiKey to this Windows device and see what certificates are in this YubiKey. You can see that I have several user certificates, including Sarah and Mike present. So let's disconnect this one. And the YubiKey. Now I have to type the PIN for the PIV card, and it's going to check on the PIV card. and now it's able to log in. So this is how we encrypt Linux devices and protect users with a PIV card. So the next thing I want to show you, as I said before, is some of the capabilities of the PIV Connect technology that we have to support authenticating multiple users over the network, and as well as unlocking the device automatically when this device is in a trusted environment. I'm going to be using the same machine. Let me restart. And what I have done here is I have given rise on this environment for any user that is registered in the database to have access to any device that is that have the WinMagic client. You don't have to do that. You can select only certain users have access to certain devices. But in this case, to make it easier, pretty much everyone has access to everywhere. Let's go back to my machine. You see that only Sarah has access here, and this last resort account that I created. So in this case, I want Mike to be able to authenticate to this device. As you can see, our client has a network stack available at Preboot. So this machine is connected to the internal network, is talking to this disconnects. And the only thing I had to do is, in this case, just type my credentials. And remember, Mike is protected with a PIV card, so I have to enter the PIN. And what it's going to do is, because Mike is not locally on this device, no cache, is going to go and ask the database, is Mike allowed in this device? And the database is going to say yes. If the protection was not a token, what it's going to do then, if we have my password in the database, it will try, but by default, it will just first try with verifying this user against Active Directory. So it's going to pass the credentials to our SD Connects, and the SD Connects verify those credentials against Active Directory. So even if Mike has never been in any machine, we don't have any password in the database anywhere, Mike can still go and do authorization against the database and the authentication against AD. But in this case, Mike is protected with a token, so the authorization is going to go against the database, but the authentication still has to go to the token. So I enter the PIN for the token, I click login, and Mike, a user that had never been in this machine before, is able to authenticate. So this was Mike. This is credentials, AD credentials. Let's give it a minute and let's refresh over here. Perfect. Okay, so I'm going to reboot this machine. Actually, I'm going to shut it down this time because I want to show you how we can use the PIV Connects technology to, in a secure way, allow machines to bypass the Preboot when in a secure network. Normally, other solutions, if you need to bypass the Preboot, they only offer you what is called permanent Autoboot. And permanent Autoboot just cache a key file on the local device, and when you turn on the machine, the Preboot is instructed to use, instead of waiting for the user to enter their credentials, to use that Autoboot key file. So that is very convenient, but it's not 100% secure because, well, the machine is not going to be asking for credentials, even if somebody takes that device away from the secure environment. So what we do with the PIV Connects Autoboot is instead of the Autoboot key file being local device, caching the device, that Autoboot key file is created every time by our database. So the machine will turn on, it will ask the database for an Autoboot key file. By default, it does that, and then the database is going to say yes or no. So let me enable the Autoboot. I'm going to do for all the devices. This is very simple. I'm going to go to a group of devices. I'm going to go to the all device group, and I just have to go to Autoboot and click please database allow devices in this group to request an Autoboot key. Now that's everything I have to do. I'm going to go back to this machine. It's the same machine, and what it's going to do is go to the Preboot. And it's going to connect, and it's going to request that key. And without the, you see, no need for user password or PIN, that machine uses Autoboot. Now, if I take that machine away from this secure environment, well, of course, it cannot connect to the database, it cannot talk to the internal SD connects, then it will force the machine to use a user ID and password. This is very convenient if you have to deploy updates and you need to do multiple reboots. You don't want the machine to be stuck at Preboot. You can just go at 5 o'clock and put that check mark there for the Autoboot, and when you finish, just check it. Or maybe you don't want the users when they are in internal in the buildings, in the new buildings, in the secure environment, to have to enter user ID and password. But still, you might want those machines to be asking for user ID and password if they leave the building. So, and I'm going to demonstrate the same thing for Windows. I mean, this is, let me go and check. This is the Autoboot. Now I'm going to show you how can I get, for example, Mic working on logging to a Windows device, because it works the same for independently of the OS that you're using. So I disable the PIV Connects Autoboot. You see my Preboot. It looks a little bit different. And I'm going to enter my credentials. Yep, my IP is protected by PIV Card. Let me go and disconnect it. On this device, okay, so already disconnected and connected here. Now I'm going to enter the PIN, and it's going to verify that Mic is authorized to log into this device, and that's it. That's how we do it. So thank you very much for listening. I mean, we demonstrated the Red Hat encryption, we demonstrated the password authentication, we demonstrated PIV authentication, we demonstrate how we can easily allow users to devices using our PIV Connects authentication. And also we demonstrate our PIV Connects Autoboot, making things a little bit more secure and easier for your environment. Thank you very much. And back to you, Lloyd.
Thank you, Raimundo. I'm just going to have Graham pull up a slide for us really quickly, just to touch on the top 3 items that we wanted to cover for the audience and making sure that you had another visual cue for that. So really what we covered off in that demo was the SecureDocs for Linux, making sure that you understand the PIV Connects technology, and then touching on the comprehensive endpoint encryption. one of the things or a couple of things I wanted to touch on for that, it really just helps organizations satisfy a couple of elements with regards to the executive order for cybersecurity. Encryption of all data at rest across the organization, including Linux devices, and the use of multi-factor authentication. So when taking a look at and understanding that a little bit further, feel free to, again, ask us any questions, reach out to us, and understand what's taking place from there. I think at this point, it's back to you, Graham, and if there's any questions from the audience.
All right, guys. So now is about the time where we transition to a more open-ended, open floor Q&A. So we're going to start taking and answering any of the questions you guys may have at this point. I saw a few came in already during our while we had the while Raimundo was running the demonstration for us. So thank you very much for those of you that got them in early. All right, so we'll just take them one by one. Okay, so this is coming from Melissa. My organization has a mix of Linux endpoints and servers. Can this solution be extended to include them as well?
Yes, SecureDoc support Linux endpoints and servers, both on premise and in the cloud, while also providing a single pane of glass, one console to manage Windows and Mac devices. Linux. In addition, we also have the largest support for self-encrypting drive and can manage any OS and SSDs.
Okay, awesome. Thanks, Ray. All right. Okay, here's where they start to come in now. All right. It's a question from Mike. Do you support other smart card options than just PIV cards?
Absolutely. We support a very extensive list of smart cards. Most cards actually will work for our solution. And should you need more specifics on this, we have a detailed list on our website, or our rep will be happy to check this for you.
Okay, awesome. All righty. Well, it looking like there's that's pinged a whole bunch of other smart card questions. So let's go and try and answer some of these as well. What is the reasoning? This is coming. Sorry, this is coming from Ray. Funny enough, what is the reasoning for enforcing smart card authentication?
Using a smart card is much more secure. It cannot be phished for credential theft and must be physically present on the device. It's actually locked with a PIN. On the other hand, if you use a password and the password becomes compromised, then it is game over. This doesn't happen with a smart card.
Ah, okay, I see. There's a real difference there. It might be small, but significant. So again, this perfectly pivots into the next question that we've got in here from Kim. Why is a smart card more secure than an other alternative, say as like an OTP or something like that?
Well, this question is related to the previous question. Smart cards are based on industry standard X509 certificates, which incorporate a public and a private key or asymmetric key-based encryption. The private key is securely stored in the smart card and protected by a PIN that only the user knows. Without that private key, there is no way to authenticate to the system. There is no password, so no credentials can be stolen.
Ah, okay, I see. That makes a little bit more sense. It looks like we have time for about one more question here. So what would you do? Let's try and pick a good one here. Okay, we're looking through the list. All right. What would you do if a user forgets their smart card PIN? Essentially, if somebody forgets their PIN, what happens?
For smart cards, as well as password-based authentication, our product supports a one-time logon using a challenge response to authenticate a user at Preboot screen. If the user forget the password or the PIN, they can use this challenge response. Once the user has been authenticated, well, then they can follow any protocol you have to reset their PINs or log into the OS.
All righty. I think that, yep, that brings us to 11:30. So for right now, any additional questions that have come in, it looks like there are a few here. We'll make sure to reach out to you directly to answer those questions one-on-one. All right. So with that, this takes us towards our wrap-up segment for today's webinar. those were, so I just want to thank everyone for attending. If we haven't got to answer your question, again, I just trying to reiterate that don't worry, somebody will answer your question. We look forward to seeing you at the next edition of the Speed webinar series, where our team of authentication and encryption experts are going to be discussing the critical role of the endpoint in cybersecurity and how you can leverage that to better overall your security profile. If you would like to learn more about WinMagic or our SecureDoc solution, follow the steps on screen to read over 60+ customer reviews on our Gartner Peer Insights listing. This is a great reference tool for those of you that are relatively new to WinMagic, and a great tool to introduce it to get yourself more familiar with some of our solutions and what they bring to the table. Until next time, these are your WinMagic encryption and authentication experts signing off.